It's 1812, and Napoleon Bonaparte is the most powerful man in Europe. By this point, his empire stretches from Spain throughout parts of Germany and Italy. The French Empire is vast and feared across the continent, and Napoleon's brilliance as a general has been proven again and again in battles like Austerlitz, where he defeated both the Russian and Austrian armies in a single day. Napoleon is on top of the world. But history tells us that one decision ultimately led to his downfall, the decision to invade Russia. This move stretches his forces to their limit, resulting in one of the most devastating losses in military history. But what if Napoleon hadn't taken that risk? What if he had chosen not to go to war with Russia? Let's explore what could have happened if he had kept the peace instead of plunging into Russia's deadly winter. Why did Napoleon decide to invade Russia? That you might ask. To understand this decision, we need to look at one of Napoleon's core strategies, the Continental Blockade. This was Napoleon's attempt to economically strangle Britain, his greatest enemy. Since Britain was protected by the English Channel and had a dominant navy, defeating them on the battlefield was nearly impossible. Instead, Napoleon sought to weaken Britain by cutting off Europe's trade with British goods, hoping that economic hardship would eventually force Britain to end the conflict. Initially, most of Europe complied with the blockade. However, over time, tension arose, especially with Russia. The blockade strained the Russian economy, and many Russian nobles who relied on trade with Britain for income began to push back. Eventually, Russia withdrew from the blockade. Napoleon saw this as a betrayal, not only one of economic strategy, but as a personal slight against him and his empire. To reassure his dominance and reinforce the blockade, he decided to invade Russia, hoping it would send a message to the rest of the world that he cannot be defined. But what if Napoleon had reacted differently? Known to not only for his military genius, but also for his diplomatic skills, he could have tried negotiation or economic sanctions to bring Russia back in line. A more patient diplomatic approach might have spared him from the disastrous campaign that followed. To ensure that Russia remained a loyal ally rather than future adversary, Napoleon would need a careful diplomatic strategy. Key moves could be: instead of establishing the Duchy of Warsaw as a buffer state which had alarmed Tsar Alexander, Napoleon could have acknowledged Russia's influence over Poland in exchange for economic incentive. Secondly, he could support Spain diplomatically instead of waging a costly war in Spain. Napoleon could have beckoned a pro-French government through diplomatic channels by fostering friendly relations with Spain. He would secure his southern flank and prevent Britain from gaining influence in the Iberian Peninsula. By forging alliance and non-aggression pacts with countries like Sweden and Denmark, Napoleon could build a coalition that would isolate Britain and reassure Russia of France's commitment to mutual interests. These alliances could create a stable framework across Europe, with each nation benefiting from alignment with France. Another thing that Napoleon could do to cement this alliance with Russia. Napoleon could propose joint investments in infrastructure projects that linked Russian resources with French markets. This would not only boost trade but also strengthen their economic ties between the two empires. By implementing these steps, Napoleon could have reassured Russia of its significance in a Franco-Russian alliance, while establishing a stable European framework that reinforced French hegemony and allowed Russia its rightful influence. One thing that we didn't talk about at all is managing the British threat. Even with Russia as an ally, Napoleon's greatest challenge would still be Britain. The British Empire was relentless in its opposition, leveraging its financial power to fund anti-French coalitions across Europe. The Continental Blockade aimed to cripple Britain economically, but it failed. Britain adapted, finding new markets in America and Asia, keeping its economy afloat. But could Napoleon have sought a truce with Britain? It wasn't entirely out of reach, and there were several scenarios where it could have worked. Firstly, Napoleon could have exploited Britain's war fatigue. By 1812, Britain had been at war for nearly a decade. Although its economy was stable, the prolonged conflict drained resources and manpower. Napoleon could have exploited this fatigue by proposing a truce with economic benefits. For instance, mutually lifting of trade restriction could benefit both economies. Another thing that could Napoleon do is using Russia as a mediator. With Russia as an ally, Napoleon could leverage Tsar Alexander I as a diplomatic bridge. Russia maintained relations with Britain, and the formation of united Franco-Russian bloc might have pressured Britain into considering peace to avoid further isolation. Even with these plans, there are extreme challenges to the truce with Britain. Despite these possibilities, severe factors made a lasting truce difficult. Deep-seated distrust, Britain's naval dominance, and public opinion on both sides would create obstacles. However, even a temporary truce could have bought Napoleon valuable time to consolidate his empire and implement reforms. With peace in Europe, Europe came across a French-led golden age. In this reality, free from devastating Russian campaign, Napoleon might have had this time and resources to transform Europe. Focusing on governance and cultural reforms without the constant need to mobilize for war, Napoleon could direct his attention to internal reforms and fostering a cultural renaissance. France, already a hub of Enlightenment thinking, could become Europe's intellectual and cultural center. Expanding Napoleon's code, which modernized legal systems across Europe, could spread further, promoting equality before the law and protection of property rights throughout the continent. With peace and cooperation, Napoleon could promote free trade, build infrastructure, and even establish a common currency, fostering economic unity across his empire. With these reforms, a French-led European Golden Age could have emerged. Enlightenment ideals would flourish, and other nations might voluntarily ally with France, seeking the benefit of stable, prosperous European order. Napoleon's legacy would shift from that of conqueror to the architect of a new European era, an empire founded on liberty, equality, and fraternity, with profound impact on history. But that will be all for me. Thank you for your attention. If you like this video, like and subscribe. Tell a friend. And goodbye.